Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of StarSound Speaks. This is your host, Irlianna Samsara of StarSound Astrology. So this is an episode dedicated to this vast archetypal crossing point. Obviously, in the collective, we are seeing this transition, this about Venus, the passing of the baton, the passing of the torch to a new era. This is being represented astrologically in many different places. So we're going to take a deeper dive into it. This is something that I addressed in episode 193 with Venus in Virgo and talking about the archetypes as Venus moves from Virgo into Libra, the cazimi, and then into Scorpio, and how she is going through this initiation phase. And I'm going to just do a deeper cut of this and more aspects of it, especially in light of the Queen's passing this week. It's certainly illuminating many of these archetypes. So here we go. Okay, first of all, interesting week, right? As you know, if you've been following the channel, all right, so if you haven't, I know there's a lot of new people here. My name's Irlianna Samsara. I do Hellenistic astrology, which is traditional classical astrology, blended with modern, using whole sign houses. And earlier in the year, when I gave my, forecast for the year 2022, I remember saying, this is definitely more than likely the year that Queen Elizabeth makes her transition. I'm not one to walk around predicting people's deaths or anything, but there were just so many indicators that were pointing to this transition time. And so, more so like archetypally and what she represents. Not so much the person and the personality, but that personality as it represents something larger, like institution of monarchy and the role of the divine feminine and all of that. So I want to talk about that. Well, it's interesting because here's this, we're talking about Venus in this episode. And so what did we have before Queen Elizabeth and her name also has to be Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister of Britain, right? It was like the last public appearance that Queen Elizabeth had made. She greeted the new Prime Minister. 2 days later, she left the planet. So it was interesting. They're both named Elizabeth. I just thought, wow, that's interesting. And I looked up the name Elizabeth, like the name meaning, and the name Elizabeth means God is my oath. And it's interesting because you know how you probably heard in the news how, when she was a very young woman, she got on the radio and said, way before her dad passed away and she became the queen, she said, it is my commitment and I make an oath to you, my lifelong oath is to be in service to the country. So interesting. She said, God is my oath. Well, here is this new Elizabeth, right? Liz Truss. And and here we are in this 21st century where the divine feminine emerges in so many ways, with Pluto and Capricorn bringing up our pain body of the patriarchy, with Me Too. There's so many aspects and so many deep, rich facets to explore with this. But the bringing forth of the divine feminine and the goddess. So I want to say, hey, maybe the new meaning, or to tweak that, is goddess is my oath. So that to kind of give a nod to the divine feminine. Well, what's interesting is right now what we're dealing with is there's as I was saying in the earlier podcast, here's Venus in Virgo, and she is in the same sign as the sun right now. It's now, I'm making this on September 10th, Saturday, September 10th, 2022. Venus is in Virgo with the sun, and she's now coming in, she's disappearing. So look at the symbology of, here's Venus disappearing behind the sun, right? Setting into the sun. So heliacal setting, and it's where she literally disappears from view. So it's like an initiation process. She goes behind the sun, she comes out, it's going to be a few months later. We won't see her visible in the sky until around Christmas time, like in December 22nd, I think. She's far enough away. It's got to be like 15 degrees away from the sun for us to see her. So she'll be emerging, as evening star at that time. So underneath the beams is kind of like this initiation process. Well, what's interesting is, and as I've mentioned also, next month in October, we have on October 22nd, we have a very interesting conjunction where Venus is cazimi, right, in the throne room of this with the sun, conjunct at 29 degrees of Libra. That's a really interesting point because it's a cardinal sign. It's in Venus's domicile, Libra, and it's at 29 degrees. So 29 degrees is considered a karmic degree or an anaretic degree, if you want to get technical with astrology. The 29th degree is the final degree of the sign, right? Because you go from 0 degrees to 30 degrees, 0 counting as the first degree. So the 30th degree of the sign is written as 29 degrees. So that represents this completion of things. And it's like the energy of Libra, for example, taken to its highest expression. So what does Venus and Libra want? It's an air sign, it's cardinal, and it's about leadership, and it's about women and equality and fairness and agreement and peace. Venus wants peace and harmony and diplomacy, for the collective, for women at large, for us in our individual relationships, right? It's all of these things. So Venus in that sign is like this, I want to say it's like a tipping point. We're at this tipping point in history where we are this new way of being, of equality and fairness and the divine feminine all coming together as it's being birthed. What's interesting too is that this cazimi star point that happens on October 22nd is also what's called, and this is I would say a relatively new concept called the Venus star point. And this happens to be about how Venus it comes into certain places as it orbits. It goes through a dance with the Earth. Of course, everything being in beautiful, harmonious cycles of time and space with planets. When Venus and the sun and the Earth all dance with each other, it actually creates Venus rules flowers. The orbital path is like a beautiful flower. So let me show you what that looks like here. I'm going to pull up this this particular thing and show you. So as you can see here, here's an example, that of the orbital path as it goes around, and it creates this beautiful flower. It actually is a lot more over time and over these points, and it's very detailed mathematically, but there's 8 cycles, 13 cycles, 4 and 8 years, and it's a very extremely complicated, richly harmonic experience, I'll say. And if you want to, I'll put the link to the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, because CIA, isn't that funny, right? Different guy at CIA. This is a Cosmic Intelligence Agency, a wonderful bunch of people, astrological group. They have summits and webinars, and they're actually coming up with one in a few weeks around this very thing. Ariel Gutman, Adam Gainsbourg, all the top astrologers who have a real Venus passion are going to be presenting. I listened to some of they had a free, like what you can watch it on YouTube, this kind of introduction to it, but it's really phenomenal. And if you're interested in really understanding and appreciating the dynamics of our planet and how we dance through the heavens and what this is meaning for us right now as a collective, I highly recommend it. They're really fantastic people. Anyways, this gives you an idea around the orbital path, as you can see, of the sun and Earth and Venus as they dance through the sky, creating this flower of life. It's this Fibonacci spiral, right? So the golden pi, the golden mean, pi, all those terms that remember 10th grade geometry. Well, little did we know, right? They always say, oh, I'm never going to use this stuff when I get out of school. Well, here we are, right? I never was good in math, but I loved geometry. Go figure. Anyway, fate, destiny. So, all right, back to our chat. So we have this, this divine dance going on, this changing of the guard, as it were, and what's really interesting is when I was tuned into the Cosmic Intelligence Agency webinar, they said that this particular star point that's happening right now is let me just pull this up. Hold on just a second. Okay, what it is let me just show you another. This is the completed picture of this beautiful, that's what it looks like remember spirograph, if you're old enough to remember. All right, you got to be like over 40, I think, for this one, but these little plastic discs we played with as kids. And you'd put this pen or pencil in these holes in these plastic discs, and they had all these little ridges on it, and you'd spiral them around, and you could make these things. And I just anything with geometry, I just love. I'm a visual person. Venus, very prominent in my chart, no doubt. No surprise. But anyway, this is the orbital path. So if you were to watch the Earth dance with the Sun and Venus around and around in this pattern, if you were like looking down, say, for example, and watching it, it would trace out like this. So these points happen like every, 8 years? There's 13 cycles of 8. I could be getting these numbers wrong. It is Mercury retrograde, so please forgive me. But anyway, Julius Simus and everybody at Cosmic Intelligence will explain this all in incredibly beautiful detail. So go watch that video. Anyway, I wanted to share that that beautiful rose. It's like a Venus rose with you. But anyway, moving back to all of this. So what we see here is this this karma, like I said, this karmic degree. And what they were talking about is that definitely a new era. It's interesting because Queen Elizabeth's passing is part of this, this waking to this new a new place for all of us, for the collective. This Venus Libra star point is getting ready to shift for the first time in our lives. It's going to shift it transitions from Scorpio to Libra in October. So as we are getting closer, right, we're like 6 or 7 weeks away from this actual transition. So it's like the winds of change, as I said in that previous podcast for September astrology, the winds of change begin, right? I kept feeling, wow, there's just looking at the astrology for the rest of the year, there's just such indications around female leadership change. I've been looking, as you know, a lot at Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's charts because I absolutely see that changing. And I kind of was like, I knew that somewhere along the line, Queen Elizabeth would shift and do her thing. But there's more to come, right? So in journalism, we say this is a developing story, and indeed it is, because it has so many facets and so many faces. It's not just women in leadership, but it's also the things that we value, right? Venus is about our self-esteem, what is important to us, our physical possessions, the money in the bank, finances, relationships, agreements, contracts and agreements, especially with Mercury retrograde in Venus's temple. Mercury rules contracts and commerce. So all of that is getting rehauled and looked at from a very higher mystical perspective. But anyway, what the wonderful goddesses at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency we're talking about is that the Venus Libra star point gets closer to shifting for the first time in our lives. It shifted about 1926, so it was almost 100 years ago, where it entered Scorpio. Well, isn't that interesting? Because 96, right? That's the age when Queen Elizabeth was born. So as you can see, that was very much in line with that, when that the same star point is now transitioning from Scorpio to Libra in October. So these winds of change happening ahead of these things, which is very common. Also, we have to remember too that the next solar eclipse is going to be at 3 degrees of Scorpio on October 25th. So 3 days after this historic Venus star point 29 Libra, 3 days later, we get a solar eclipse in Scorpio, 3 degrees of Scorpio, which is very close to Prince Charles's sun is Prince Charles's moon, sorry, is 0 Scorpio. So he's having an eclipse on his moon. And as we know, eclipses can often open up events even before they happen. It can be 6 months, or even my first astrology teacher said she'd see things happen a year before the eclipse. Well, if you remember last year when Prince Philip passed away, excuse me, he passed away, what, a couple of months. It was in April, late April, and his there was an eclipse exactly on his sun to the degree on in Gemini. He would have been 100 years old. So there was an eclipse, excuse me, a solar eclipse on his sun. Obviously, it's a very big deal. Solar being the leader or a monarch or a leader of a country. A major life change. Yes, he left the planet. And so, but it was before the eclipse even happened. So that's very common. So as we can see, there's a lot of important major endings, major beginnings, which is always what eclipses portend. In the case of this particular Venus star point, this is another great, and again, a longer term transit. When something takes 96 years, right, that's a cycle that most of us alive did not see, any other monarch but her. You had to be in your 90s, to know any other monarch, for example. And with the Venus star point being in Scorpio, now going into Libra for the first time. The last time Libra, we had a 0 degree Libra star point was in 1879. And I think about what all that entailed. And I think about the great mystic, Madame Blavatsky. Let me see if I can find a picture of her. I know I can. All right, hold on just a second. Okay, so here's Madame Blavatsky, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a Russian mystic and author. She started the Theosophy movement around that time of that last Libra star point, 0 degrees, critical degree of Libra. Now we're at the 29th degree, you see. So these are critical beginnings and ending points. She started the Theosophical Society, and by 1879, she had moved to India and had a number of mystical experiences. But I like to think of her as being like the world's first feminist, or like true feminist. This is a woman who, without getting into a hugely detailed explanation, but something worthy of discussion here, she was arranged marriage to a Russian nobleman when she was very young, like 17, and she ditched the marriage. I mean, can you imagine getting married in like the 1860s or 70s and then just ditching the guy like we do today? It's like, you couldn't even be seen in public without an escort, right? Because they'd think you were a lady of the night, right? So you always had to be escorted by either your mama or your nanny or your husband, like the choices in that time period being so, but she chucked all that social conditioning and social consciousness and created her own path. And she is considered, by most people agree, that she was really the root of everything that she brought to the world: one world religion and the ancient esoteric religions and doctrines of all the ancient wisdom traditions, and founding the Theosophical Society. That she was really like the progenitor of what we know as the New Age movement in their time period. So really an amazing mystic and clairvoyant and such, an author, of course. So again, it pointing to this here. I can't think of anybody better in terms of being truly really badass. Like this badass feminist. She really was. And she took, just take no prisoners, right? Just like live your life, live it fully, break tradition, break new ground as a woman, doing things that women didn't do, And so anyway, you know, here's this archetype, right? And now we are at the 29th degree, right? The which is a completion degree, and it's you know, opening doors, opening portals to new and higher expressions of this divine feminine energy. So, anyway, enough of that, right? At least we get the idea about what's, you know, what's truly going on here. All right, so now let me go on to, I got my little notes here. So this definitely being so we see this transformation from Scorpio, which is, you know, when you think about Scorpio too, the last time that the Venus star point was in Scorpio was 1926 when it entered Scorpio. Well, what were the 20s? You know, when you think about sexuality and things taboo and secrets and taboo, and this the very core of life representing transformation through crisis and explosive, intensely explosive volcanic experiences of psychological insight, you know, all things Scorpio, breakdown to breakthrough. When you think about the 1920s and women, right? Let's go back to that. This is the decade where women, they didn't wear the long dresses for like, think about it, thousands of years women wore gowns, right? Whether it was a biblical era gown or long you know, garment to the, like, tunic from the biblical age, and then into the you know, European Western history with dresses and gowns and things, and then up until like World War I, with women still wore those Victorian Edwardian long dresses that were almost down to their ankles, and then they just ditched them and started wearing, they showed their knees, you know, they rolled down their stockings and they showed their knees, and they had bare dresses and Coco Chanel, and, you know, this was really radical. And so making out in the back seat of a what was those, rumble seat, you know, in the Model T or Model A Ford, you know, so this was a very you know, this licentious age by many of those people who were looking at this, you know, with maybe a critical eye, but it was very much about an exploration of an Isadora Duncan, you know, like all these people that are opening doors like this, and in terms of our expression as women. And so there was that Venus star point in Scorpio, right, exploring these taboos, exploring what it means to be a woman, exploring all, and whether or not we're, whatever gender we are, is like breaking that down and exploring deeply, going into these unknown or secrecy, taboos, all that exploration. And now we're, having spent 100 years with the Venus star point Scorpio, now we are moving into this, the tracing is into Libra. It's going to start, it's starting to move into Libra. And so it's really the end of an era. So we have Elizabeth and Elizabeth. There's, you know, I found it really interesting too, to look at these, the picture of this interesting, here's the photo of Queen Elizabeth with Liz Truss, right? This was like probably the last official picture. It's interesting, the angle here, and like the story it tells, like obviously there's probably, everyone in the world is taller than Queen Elizabeth was, you know, she shrank and ate, you know, she was probably always tiny, but then she, you know, little old lady, right? And here's this towering woman. And so here's like this torch being moved to it, you know, here's the torch being passed, right, from one to the next, a few generations separate, right, with their age difference. But, you know, yes, Liz Truss is a member of the Conservative Party, but I did a little bit of homework on her, and it turns out she was, she had been a very liberal in Oxford, where she went to college. And when she was 19, she actually went on record and questioned the monarchy. So like the day after she meets the Queen here, the day before the Queen dies, we find out in this news report that Liz was had talked about questioning the monarchy as a 19-year-old. Why do we need the monarchy, right? And then I have nothing against them personally. I'm just wondering, you know, this institution, like, who needs it, right? So I don't know if any, I have no idea whether any member of parliament or or prime minister ever I mean, prime minister, member of parliament who became a prime minister, ever felt that way, because to me they were all pretty conservative, even if, as a Tory, like a Tony Blair. I don't know if anybody had ever said anything that intense, around the monarchy, but she did. Now, she did change parties, so I don't know where she stands with all that, but I just found it was really interesting that here is this person who's representing this new era and a new and that there are many people out there, as much as there are people grieving and feeling sad about this passing, but there are many, especially in the third world, who are not, who are really they're like, hey, we know that there's a big pain body to be dealt with the institutional racism and the genocide and everything that has been perpetuated by the British Crown for so many centuries. Even there's a woman here quoting the New York Times. A teacher in Sheffield, England said, for some Brightons, those battered by the high cost of living and skyrocketing energy costs, and others with more conflicted views on the monarchy, news of the Queen's death also opened a tense divide. So she said, the royals seem to be adored by so many, and at times like this, I find it a bit frustrating when so many are suffering and those in power don't appear to care about that. She added, I don't think you can have a family paid for by the state be free of scrutiny. So, there are many sides to this passing and what it means to people. Interestingly enough, Mercury is actually, the planet Mercury in retrograde, Neptune in retrograde. There's an Antisha, which is a secretive conjunction with Neptune. Mercury and Neptune are in Antisha over the next week. Very interesting. What's an Antisha? It's actually a secretive conjunction. It's something that we studied in Hellenistic astrology. It has to do with, without getting into a deep discussion here, it just has to do with the amount of light that it holds in terms of where the hours of sunlight. So the hours of sunlight of a planet at 8 degrees of Libra is equal to, or say 6 degrees of Libra, and it has to add up to 30 degrees. And so Neptune's at around at 24 Pisces. So when now that Mercury is retrograding back to 6 degrees, so there's this an Antisha forming over the next week that'll really perfect around Saturday of next week. But it's the secretive conjunction, because they both, those degrees and signs have the same amount of light. And think about the in the northern hemisphere, the springtime of Pisces, 24 degrees of Pisces, has the same amount of sunlight as 8 degrees of Libra. So the fading sun, the rising sunlight, and there's an equilibrium there. So they have this kind of affinity, an astrological correspondence. So what does that mean? Well, Mercury in Libra, retrograde, Neptune in Pisces, retrograde. Mercury can be gossip and slander and or secrets and secret agreements when you think about it in Libra, and Mercury's about siblings, and I think about Prince Harry and Prince William, all that so-called rivalry and all that stuff that has been going on for many years, a few years now. And so wondering, there on one side with that secretive conjunction with Neptune, there's this opportunity for mercy and kindness and kind words, which we saw, in Prince Charles's speech. He mentioned he wished them well as they started or continued their life abroad. And I'm like, well, that was like the nicest thing I ever heard him say about them, at least from all the chatter that you see online. Who knows how much of that is true and how much of that is gossip. But on the other hand, there is this, this is an idea about things that can come back on you. Like there was that Nigerian professor that said those really nasty, that whole thing about wishing the Queen really ill as she died. I didn't want to repeat it. It was really negative. However, we look at the pain body that prompted her to say that, where her her family was Nigerian, and she remembered these rebellions and how the British had genocided her people. And so there's a pain body that has to be healed here, clearly, amongst many people. She talked about that, and many others did too, like the people in the Commonwealth countries, like Jamaica and Barbados. Jamaica has said, we're going to break from the Commonwealth. And they said this months ago, right? And when Catherine and William visited there in March, they were in, they remember there was a lot of protests. It really didn't go very well. Somebody didn't do good electional astrology for that trip. But anyway, there was even the people, and you would think, oh, well, the young people, right? It's not Prince Charles and Camilla, it's the young generation. So they thought, oh, well, this is great. These millennials are going to be well received. Wasn't. There was a formal apology. They were calling for a formal apology for the royal family's links to slavery. There were these advocates and activists that said, for 70 years in your throne, they said your grandmother has done nothing to redress and atone for the suffering of our ancestors that took place during her reign, and or during the entire period of British trafficking of Africans, enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. So the reason I'm bringing all this up and going to this detail is because there is this narrative, especially with this in Tisha, Mercury and Neptune. There is this narrative of glamour when you think about Neptune being this pretty facade of kind words and sweetness, but it can also mask some painful things like this, and it can also mask gossip and ill will and things. So there's all sides of this. So Mercury and Libra, let's be honest, and let's look at all sides, and let's not delude ourselves. Let's not be taken in by this aura of, oh, this family is grieving. And like, yes, there is that, and at the same, there's this yes, and there is also this. Third world countries being very muted in their response to her passing because of they're in a different situation. And so we have to respect and see all sides of this. I thought it was interesting too when in Prince Charles's address, he mentioned that the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine, how they're going to continue their work. And he said he knows that they will continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the center ground where vital help can be given. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, ooh, Pluto in Aquarius. There we go. Pluto in Capricorn, about to move in March of next year. It will hit 0 Aquarius. And so there's that conversation around the fringe on the outside comes to the center. The center cannot hold, center being royals, elite, Jeff Bezos, fill in the blank, right? It's about bringing these outsiders, being you and I, that pay tax, and Jeff doesn't, and well, and people getting fed up with that, and saying, wait a minute, this is not sustainable. But it's not, it's just, with all due respect, it's not working. I think we're all pretty much in agreement on that. How it's going to work all out, I don't know, but we just stay in faith and stand in the middle, stand in our peace, knowing that all of this is obviously this divine Leela playing out, this divine play for a purpose. But as we can see, this is bringing the marginal, right, the outside. When he said William and Catherine with their charity work, especially mental health and things, bringing the marginal to the center ground where help can be given. So I love that. I'm like, wow, that's just so cool. There, he's speaking the astrology that's coming, bringing the marginal to the center. Let's see, what else do I have here? Yeah, so with this Mercury Neptune and Tisha for the next week, one of the things you want to look at is, again, especially, this kind words, this week, as I said in the previous, the Astro weekly weather forecast, that we have this Venus and Mars squaring Tuesday into Friday. It's like a square, so we want to be careful that it's not like war of words and criticism, but that Mercury, Neptune, and Tisha can kind of gloss things over, and you know, as a way of you know, kind words and things, and maybe backstabbing, you know, like, oh, smile, smile, when they throw a knife in your back, you know, that's obviously not cool. But it's also an opportunity for forgiveness. So let's bring this into a higher vibration here, because that the very same forces that can be used in that way can also be used to elevate. So Neptune being around compassion and unconditional love and forgiveness, and looking, you know, beyond some kind of pain, and addressing healing, the opportunity for healing and such, and bringing our thoughts and behaviors and speech into harmony, where we can work out healing. So so there, and that goes not just for them, but let's say, you know, anyone in our world, anyone, when you think of the collective, like the people who are sad and grieving from the pain body of centuries of British oppression and genocide and such, to say, okay, yes, that happened, and reparations, they've been talking about that. So reparations, and whatever that looks like, but certainly we have to forgive, let go of the past, take that, make those efforts in however way we can, with support and all, to choose, you know, to move out of the past where we have been enslaved, and to step into the current moment. If anything, if Uranus and Taurus is reminding us of, is being here now. The past is the past. There's nothing we can do. It was a horrible, you know, several centuries, slavery, etc. The United States, of course, we have been still living with the aftermath of all that, and we see a healing, this turning of the page. And that's what I love about this, coming back to the Venus archetype, the changing of the guard, where we're really standing for harmony and equality. So yeah, what is the ideal narrative? You know, what kind of world do we want to see? I think too, with the Mercury and Tisha with Neptune, when you think about Mercury and words, like words cast energies, and spell casting, as Carolyn Meese talks about, spell casting. So what kind of words are we casting out there? What is our language doing mathematically? Because it's creating a certain, you know, it's all chemical. All of it is. It's an alchemy. So being that we're in charge and we get to say how it goes, and then there are no victims, well, what kind of words do we want to speak? Who are we going to be, and how do our words reflect or not reflect who we say we are, or what we wish for ourselves? So that Mercury retrograde is definitely a powerful time to be coming into awareness of all these things. I think too, in just wrapping this up, I want to say that with this upcoming Scorpio eclipse, you know, Venus moving from the cazimi point and the star point at 29 Libra, she's in the throne in her domicile with the high priestess, right? And getting this download of cosmic, you know, this connection with these archetypal principles. And then she'll, as she moves out of that, she goes right into exile in Scorpio. So it's like saying, okay, it's interesting because the Venus star point's moving from Scorpio to Libra, but then transiting in the sky, it's going from Libra to Scorpio. So if it sounds a little confusing, don't worry. It's, again, it's this rebirth. It's a changing of the guard, and it's moving into these an initiatory process. And there is going to be, the eclipse is going to be Venus 2 degrees of Scorpio, Sun, Moon, and Venus 222, all 2 degrees of Scorpio on October 25th. Solar eclipse, right? Major change, and in our collective path. And so Venus in exile is like, okay, I've left my comfort zone, and I'm going to be be comfortable with the unknown, and connect and know myself from the very core of my being, to step into my power, to purify myself, right? That's what an initiation does. When you think about Scorpio, the snake that sheds its skin, the skin that no longer serves, transforming from the within to the without, having an effect on all areas of our life, relationships, self-worth, self-esteem. I think too about the Libra archetype. You know, the shadow of Libra is like this vacillating uncertainty, this obsession with what do other people think of me, having that dictate what we do and how we show up in our life, this fear of not being loved and that needing others' approval, keeping up appearances, needing to look good, jealousy, vanity. These are all shadow Venus that we, you know, shallowness. So we want to look at all, comparing ourselves to others, big one, right? The feeling that we're not enough, you know, feeling we have to compromise ourselves to avoid conflict. You know, what was that, like peace for the sake of, you know, just do anything to have peace, just to shut them up and just, you know, give them whatever they want just to avoid confrontation, people pleasing, like, and learning that, look, yes, you want to be a peacemaker, but we also, doesn't mean that we're doormats either. You know, there's this line that we have to be very clear about. And in order to have connection, belonging, and agreement, that we have, these are things that we want to be honest with ourselves to build authentic connection. And this new world, this divine feminine consciousness that is absolutely wrapping that archetype is, and that frequency, if you want to say it that way, and that dimensional, that dimension, I want to say it's like the fifth dimension, right? This is the fifth element. You remember that movie? It was really fabulous. The French director Luc Besson, and it was with Mila Jovovich and Bruce Willis. Fabulous movie. And they talk about the fifth element. But anyway, very Venusian. If you haven't seen it in a while, see it again. If you've never seen it, definitely. It's funny. It's brilliant. Luc Besson is just a brilliant French film director. But anyway, little plug for Luc. Venus archetypes. Yes. So I guess that's all I wanted to share with you today. Oh, I guess I should just finish that out by saying, don't you think it's interesting that at the same time all of this is happening, we had Venus Williams was, you know, here she is. Venus she was leaving, right? Her final, you know, the US Open, right? Her final of her career, one of the most outrageous athletes that ever lived in our lifetime or anybody's. And here's her outfit, and look at that, it's all stars. It looks like the Star of Bethlehem. So it's these beautiful stars in her outfit. It's so cosmic, and it's black, and it's beautiful, and one of a kind, and fully empowered. Here she is in joy. And yes, she lost the match, but again, it kind of symbolic too. It's like this loss of, here's Venus going to the underworld. Successful though, a huge success. Yes, it was kind of bittersweet that she lost, but she still went out on top. No matter whether she won or lost, she has won, right? And as she's now retiring and leaving the light, just like Venus is disappearing behind the sun, so is Venus. She is in Venus, Ms. Venus Williams. Venus and Venus, right? They're both disappearing. She here is attending to motherhood and her new life, and leaving behind this process of transformation. So I just thought that was really, really cool at the same time. All right, that's all I had for today. And I hope you have enjoyed this chat and got something out of it. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and you know, how you're seeing all this. I love hearing from all of you. And if you need any assistance or anything, or you have any questions, you can shoot me an email, Irlianna at StarSoundAstrology.com. Also available for sessions, whatever it is that I can do to help you and be in service. I'm so very, very, very excited to do so. So all for now, and until next time, thank you all so much for listening. Many blessings to you. This is Irlianna Samsara, StarSound Speaks, StarSoundAstrology.com. Take care now.